Hey guys, welcome back to an interesting video on Wild Rift. So today we're finally back with our latest tier list for patch 4.2b, and basically there's only a couple of real big changes that happened in this patch. Firstly is the fact that lethality items like Youmuu's Ghostblade and Serpent's Fang got buffed, and secondly it's Hullbreaker got nerfed. But I think Hullbreaker nerf honestly doesn't affect top lane tier list too much. Of course ADCs are still really strong ever since patch 4.2, and of course same like last patch, I'm actually going to start off with the ADC role. Now I've actually reordered a lot of ADCs in the ADC role, as you guys can see, and I'm going to explain why, and probably going to talk a little bit more about ADC since this is of course my area of expertise. This is really the only role that I can confidently say I know what I'm talking about, but other roles probably I know support second best, and then like I probably know Baron Lane the worst. But anyways, let's jump straight into talking about ADCs. Now, personally, I think the top 3 ADCs at the moment are Tristana, Kai'Sa, as well as Ezreal. Now, I think that we're in a meta where hyper carry ADCs are sort of better in the meta at the moment, which is why I think Tristana and Kai'Sa are currently the 2 best ADCs. Kai'Sa, we know she got nerfed like 2 patches ago, but honestly the nerf to her like W damage and her base attack speed is really not too bad, and she's still really strong. The only thing that's really done that nerf is change people's perception of her that she is not so strong anymore, which she really is still really strong. So if anything, it's an advantage because Kai'Sa used to be permabanned and now she isn't, so she's not really strong, whether playing front to back or whether diving backline. And ironically, Tristana also has the same playstyle where she can either dive backline or she can play front to back as well, and also depending on of course the stage of the game. We're gonna come up with an updated complete guide for Tristana really soon, and you guys can see more about Tristana when that video drops. But anyways, I think that Tristana is the best ADC in the current meta because she's really strong in the early game despite the like health nerfs that she got. It's targeted more to her solo lanes, and she is really strong in the late game as well. So Ezreal, I think, is just a champion that you can really pick in any match with any team comp, against any team comp, and there really isn't a place where he's bad in. So in my opinion, if you're good at Ezreal, and especially after those Ezreal buffs, and like Ezreal can build other items like Essence Reaver and such, we'll also be dropping some Ezreal guides, you know, in a couple of days time. So really, I think Ezreal is a champion who's good like all of the time. So I think Ezreal's up there. Corki as well. Corki sort of just works really like for poke, for damage, and he does provide magic damage as well, and really does everything you want. Now I've actually dropped Vayne down because I think that I've overrated Vayne a little bit, and the main reason I say that is because I think Vayne is a champion that's really only good into tanks. I think that if you play into like squishies or carries, she really isn't that good. Like going for Tristana or Kai'Sa is going to be way better than going for Vayne. So I think that Vayne is a really strong champion, but I think the only thing holding her back is she's kind of dependent on the enemy team comp, having like tanks for her to shred and for her strength to really shine through. So I've dropped her down to S because she can't really play in into any team comp, or rather it's not optimal to play into every team comp. Now I think I underrated Jhin last patch, so I moved him up from A+ to the top of S. So I think Vayne and Jhin are kind of like borderline S+, but I don't think they're on like the same power level as the S+ champions. I think they're sort of hovering between S and S+. I don't think that they're as weak as the other S champions afterwards, but yeah. So anyways, I think Jhin is really strong. He's not really a hyper carry, but he does scale quite well into the late game. He has a very strong early game. Pretty much he has a pretty even curve throughout the game where he's strong at early, mid, and late, like with every item and such, and he does pretty insane amounts of damage as well. And yeah, he's just doing really well in the current meta. Nothing too much to say about that. Varus, also doing really well in the current meta. Very versatile. Can build on hit, lethality, AP. We've been through all of that. In fact, there's even a new Varus build with Essence Reaver, which I'm going to be covering in videos pretty soon. I've already got the gameplay for that. I'm going to post the video sooner or later. And yeah, so I think that one of the main strengths that Varus has is the fact he can build lethality. So he can actually take advantage of like the buffs to items like Ghostblade and Serpent's Fang, and he can build lethality and into squishy team comps, which you see more and more often nowadays. Of course, with Ornn and Volibear, you don't really, they aren't squishy, but there are certain team comps where you see like an ADC in the jungle or mid, or like the whole enemy team comp is squishy. We have multiple matches of those, and I think in those matches, lethality Varus is really strong. Now Draven, if you're good at him, he's always going to be good. So in my opinion, Draven is always going to be like an S tier champion. Now next, Caitlyn and Xayah. I think I've underrated them a bit by putting them in the A+ tier. Now they're not quite hyper carries, but they both have their own strengths. So in my opinion, they're a little bit like Vayne in the sense that they're kind of dependent on enemy team comp on how good they really are. So for example, Xayah, if you're into champions that want to jump in on you like Riven, Akali, Alistar, whatever, like those kind of champions that want to go in on you, Xayah becomes like S+ kind of champion. But the only reason why she's not an S+ is because, as I said, she's very situational. And if you're playing into a team that doesn't want to go into you, she kind of like isn't really very good. So that's why she's there. Same goes for Caitlyn. Caitlyn kind of sucks into matches with assassins. She just gets one shot, but in matches that she can play like front to back, she's one of the best ADCs to play because of her long range. So next up in the A+ tier, we actually have Zeri, Twitch, and Jinx, and the explanation for all three of them are roughly the same. There are three very strong hyper carries, but they just aren't the first choice hyper carries. Like you would choose Tristana and Kai'Sa 100% of the time over Zeri, Twitch, and Jinx, but because of how strong hyper carries are in the current meta, I still think that these three are really, really strong. And if you are like a main or of the three of them, or if you're good at them, they definitely can work, and they're definitely still amazing. But I just don't think that they're on the same level as other hyper carries in the game. So now, next we move on to Lucian and Samira. Now, some people might be thinking, why are they ranked so low? Like, I've gotten destroyed by so many Lucians and Samiras. Well, the reason is, you really only suffer against Lucian and Samira if you misplay against them in the early game. Or like on the flip side, if you're playing as them, you have to have a good early game to have a dominant and a good game. Like, if you're even on Lucian and Samira versus like any of the champions above them, you're in trouble. You need to have a big early game lead for them to actually be good. So for that reason, I don't think they're really strong in the current meta. Now, the only reason why I think they're still A+ is because against a lot of champions, like for example the three other champions in A+ tier, they can kind of bully them in the early game. But even like trying to fight against Ezreal, Kai'Sa, and Tristana in the early game, like even though like Tristana and Kai'Sa are hyper carries, they're still really strong in the early game. So you can't really like try to one shot a Kai'Sa or a Tristana. They can fight back. So Lucian and Samira just not too good in the current meta at the moment. Finally, we have the two worst ADCs, which is of course MF and Ashe. Of course, I've thrown in Senna there as well. If you play like farming Senna, she's gonna be there. I think that despite the buffs to MF, I still don't think she's really all that good. Like, I think she's alright, but again, she's very team comp dependent. You need people to have CC for her to really cast her ult in. If not, she's not very strong. And for Ashe, she's just utility, very little damage, very, very hard to carry with Ashe. So with all that out of the way, we can now move on to talking about top lane and move on from top lane down. Okay, so first off, before we get into covering Baron lane, kind of wanted to point out something, which is that Ornn and Volibear have been played in a lot of roles. I've heard of Ornn support, I've heard of like Ornn jungle, but I just haven't seen it personally. So I don't have like Ornn on like support and like jungle tier list, for example. I only have Ornn top, Volibear top, and Volibear jungle, because those are really the only things that I've seen. I've seen like Volibear mid like one time, like AP Volibear mid. I've seen it once, but I really don't know enough about it to put it on my tier list. I'm not gonna try to be pretentious and just put it on there when I really don't know anything about it. So anyways, let's jump straight in. Now, as you guys can see, Ornn is far and away the best top laner in my opinion. I think he's incredibly tanky. He can buy items out of base. He can let his teammates, especially his ADC, buy items out of base. He has a lot of CC. He has a huge teamfight ultimate, and I think he's just really, really broken at the moment. So, I think Ornn is definitely the best. Now, coming up next is Gwen. Now, Gwen kind of counters tanks and ADCs at the same time, which is basically the two things that are strong in the meta. So, she counters champions like Ornn and Garen because she does true damage, and she basically just shreds them down. She counters ADCs because she has the mist, so if she's shredding down your front line, the ADC can't do damage to her because she's in the mist. So really, I think Gwen is just really, really strong at the current moment now. Garen did get a little bit weaker by not being able to build Hullbreaker, but even without Hullbreaker, you go for like items like Black Cleaver, Sterak's Gauge, and like Twin Guard, you're still really strong, you're still really tanky. Hullbreaker is not a necessary item for Garen, just that it worked really well for him, giving him a split push playstyle together with a lot of tankiness. Without like that tankiness, he can still split push, he can still teamfight. In fact, it kind of makes it even better to incentivize him to join his team instead of split pushing. So I think Garen is still really really good. Wukong as well, still really strong. Builds like hybrid, like between a tank and a bruiser, like items like Divine Thunder, Black Cleaver, and then like items like Twin Guard and Death's Dance. Does a lot of damage and also huge teamfight impact. Now we have a lot of champions in the S tier. I think there's a lot of good champions in the S tier. I'm just only going to talk about some because we don't have time to talk about every single one. So firstly, Sion. He was another Hullbreaker user, but again, like Garen, you don't have to build Hullbreaker on Sion. I think the only reason these champions were building Hullbreaker was simply because of how broken that item was, and if it's not broken, they can always opt into other tank items. So I think Sion is still same in terms of power level. And I moved Fiora up quite a bit, mostly because they buffed her cooldown on her Q. And I believe that buff on cooldown on her Q is going to make people who know how to play Fiora make her look really, really strong. Now, of course, Fiora is a very, very high skill floor champion. So if you don't know how to play Fiora, I don't think it's going to really work out. But if you're like a good Fiora player, sorry about that. So if you're a good Fiora player, I believe that she works wonders, and I believe that, she can easily carry games, like, through split pushing, team fighting, 1v1, like, maybe not really team fighting, but, if you're good on Fiora, you can still, like, come in from flanks and and assassinate people. I've definitely been a victim of that in my recent few matches. And yeah, so, another champion I want to highlight is Volibear. So I think Volibear is a solid A+ tier. I really don't think he's that strong in the battling, because I really feel like one of Volibear's main strengths is actually his ganking potential, like with running in with his Q and stunning someone, and you can't really do that in top lane. Now, of course, you are really tanky and you do have really good sustain, so I still think that, Volibear is pretty decent in top lane, but I think that a lot of times I overrate new champions, and I really don't think Volibear in the Baron lane is that strong, so I still think a lot of other champions are better than him, as you can see from this tier list. And yeah, so the rest of the Baron lane tier list pretty much stays the same. So now we're gonna move on to talking about the jungle. Okay, so honestly, I think that almost everything has stayed the same for jungle. There's very, very little that changed. So I'm just gonna talk a little bit about what has changed now. Kayn and Kha'Zix, I've already put at the top of the tier list, like last patch. So now with the lethality items being even stronger, that they are even stronger. Their position in the tier list hasn't changed, but they have definitely become stronger. Gwen is there for the same reasons as she is in the Baron lane, but this time she gets a free pass on like her early game, and she can probably get to like 2 items or so without really having to fight so much. Gwen is more of like a farming jungle who like farms up to 1 to 2 items, and then she starts to fight. Doesn't really gank, too much, but basically in the jungle she gets like relatively free early game. So some other champions I want to point out is Rammus. I think is highly underrated by a lot of people. He is so overpowered in this like ADC, AD focused meta. Like whenever I see a Rammus on my team, I'm very happy because the enemy team very often has like one. It definitely always has 1 ADC, but very often has like 2 ADC, sometimes even 3. And Rammus just counters these team comps like so hard. So yeah, another one I wanted to point out is Vi and Jarvan. Now, Vi and Jarvan used to build like Bruiser, and they're the ganking junglers. But now, lethality, Vi and Jarvan are becoming very, very popular. Items like Serpent's Fang, Collector, Edge of Night, as well as Yomu's Ghostblade are now like staples on these 2 champions. And basically what's happened here is they've gone from like a jungle who needs their team to follow up to like basically becoming a one-shot assassin. So now they're like super squishy, but they basically become jungle assassins, and I think that they might move up in the tier list. I'm not too sure yet, so I'm conservatively putting them in the middle of S tier. They might move to S+, or they might be at the top of S, depending on how this the rest of the patch goes. But they can basically just jump in on an ADC, one-shot them, Jarvan takes like Electrocute. He just EQs onto the ADC, autos Electrocute. Sometimes you die without even needing him to ult. So other times you of course EQ, auto ult, and like they're just dead. Like they're just dead with the Electrocute. They just get one shot. So I think that they could possibly be really, really strong. I'm not too sure how strong exactly they are yet, but I of course think that they are really strong. So now we have Volibear, our new addition. I think he's a really strong ganking jungler. Disabling towers is a huge deal, and honestly, after all this time, I've not yet been a victim of a Volibear ulting me while I'm under my tower to die me. I don't know how, I don't know why, but I really haven't been a victim of that as of yet. But in theory, I think this is gonna be a really, really strong thing that Volibear can do. I just haven't played against a lot of good Volibear jungles, but I've tested Volibear out myself, and I do think that he's a really strong champion. I think that he's getting banned a lot, and of course a lot of people are playing him top as well. So Volibear jungle is something that that I see not often enough, I think, but I think that he's gonna be good. So Kai'Sa and Twitch just represents ADCs in the jungle. You know, we have Kai'Sa, Twitch, Tristana, Vayne even. I think that they are like not good because you ruin your team comp completely, and ADC trying to smite a dragon, like, it's so easy to get one shot before you can smite and that sort of deal. But if you're good at them, I think that they can still be good, which is why I still put them like in the S tier. So yeah, and honestly, past the S tier, the rest of the jungle tier list just remains entirely the same as the last patch. So now we can move on to talking about mid lane. Okay, so there's a new king of mid lane, or not really king, but as you can see, I ranked him 3rd. It's gonna be Zed. Now Zed is somebody I want to talk about, because now Zed with the new lethality changes, oh my goodness, he just one-shots me every time. Like, I can be at full health as an ADC, he ults me, if he lands all of his like shurikens and his like shadow slashes, I just get one shot 100 to 0. And there's even a time that I got like the mark at like half health, and that was after his combo, so I was at full health, he ulted me, he of course did his E and his Q, and I was at half health, and there wasn't the indicator that I was gonna die, so I thought that I would be fine. I got ignited, the thing popped, and the ignite just killed me, and I was wondering how does the death mark do like more than 50% of my health, and then I realized that, you know, number 1, it's a Zed. Number 2, of course, the lethality items are not really strong, and thus Zed is really strong. I see Zed like every game nowadays. It's insane. He's either on my team or on the enemy team. I see Zed every single game, and I do think that Zed's really strong, particularly because now the way the meta works is, of course, the meta just sort of shifts itself. So when tanks are strong, ADCs become strong because ADCs can kill tanks with their DPS, contrary to popular belief. Now ADCs are strong because of the items, so now assassins are becoming strong because assassins are the one who can kill ADCs. So it's sort of like a cycle where basically now, because ADCs are strong, assassins will be strong as well, which is why like we have champions like Kha'Zix, Kayn, and Zed becoming really, really strong in the meta, because they just counter ADCs, because ADCs get one shot by assassins. So aside from Zed, we have other like sort of assassins like Akali, who's really strong. She got buffed like 2 patches ago. Irelia is still really strong diving onto the backline. Zoe is really good if you're good at Zoe. I think a good Zoe is one of the most scary things you can encounter. You'll land those bubbles, land those Qs, and like you just keep getting one shot. Same goes for Yone. I think Yone is a champion that's way too popular, but not many people are actually really good on him. But the people who are really good at him make him look like a monster, and he's definitely like the best mid lane champion if you are good on Yone. Now, as always, mid lane has so many good champions. Of course, I've only picked the top 5 for the S plus tier, but there's so many good champions in the S tier. You can see it pretty much remains the same. However, I wanted to point out one champion, Ziggs. So Ziggs is a really interesting one because he's gotten basically all of his nerfs reverted on him. Like, there was a point that Ziggs was the best mid lane champion. He got nerfed like 5-6 times, or like maybe even more. But he got nerfed so many times, and now they've been buffing him the past couple of patches, and I've noticed that those buffs are basically almost like reverting all the nerfs he got like a year or 2 years ago when he was like the strongest mid laner. So because he's now back to that kind of state, I believe that Ziggs might be a hidden OP pick. So I believe that Ziggs might be actually S+, just that people haven't really seen it yet. The main issue with Ziggs is that the S+ champions now, we have Akali, Zed, Irelia, Zoe, and Yone. They all kill him incredibly easily. I think that that's why he's not so good now. But I think that when assassins start to fade away from the meta, or start to become a bit less popular, I think Ziggs will one day be the best mid lane champion if he doesn't get nerfed. So the rest of the tier list remains the same. Of course, if you're playing an ADC in mid, it's like the bottom of A+ tier. Kai'Sa represents ADCs in mid, like the Tristanas, the Vaynes, the Kai'Sas, the Varuses, etc. Once again, it's the same story as the jungle. If you're good on ADCs, they can work in mid, but again, it's probably going to ruin your team comp. You're not going to have magic damage. You're going to be squishy, and like, you know, you're going to have a double ADC team comp, and you know, that's not always a good thing. Most of the time it's bad actually. So yeah. Now with all that out the way, we're going to talk about support. Okay, so finally, we have support. And honestly, I think that the support tier list is the only tier list that I think nothing has changed at all. I'm going to point out a couple of supports in general, particularly in the top tiers, of course. Now, of course, we know Lulu, Yuumi are kind of the best supports to go along with hyper carries, but the other two, Karma and Nami, are a little bit more agency, a little bit stronger in lane, but of course the trade-off is a little bit less kind of buffing potential onto your ADC. So basically it's kind of what you want. If you're dual queue, probably Yuumi and Lulu are going to be really good because you can trust your ADC. But in solo queue, probably Nami and Karma are probably going to be better because you have more agency yourself. And then we talk about S tier. So I'm going to talk about all the S tier champions. First up, we have Pyke. Now, I think Pyke is borderline S+. Even before the lethality buffs, I think Pyke was really strong already. With the lethality buffs, it's put him over the top. And if you're really good on Pyke, I noticed that the good Pykes always live on 1 HP. Like, no joke, I think if you're a good Pyke, you always live on 1 HP. You're not the kind of Pyke that takes no damage. No, no, no. You're gonna be the Pyke that goes in, takes a lot of damage, and then you flash out or like you swim out or whatnot, and you always live on 1 HP and leave the enemy team frustrated. I've run into a couple of these kind of like good Pykes, like in Master Tier and whatnot, and they really play Pyke very well. Basically, they're always playing on the edge. They always, live on 1 HP. And I've seen a lot of Pyke pentakills recently, and I don't like it. But anyways, I think Pyke is really, really strong. Like, once again, Assassin counters ADC. Speaking of ADC, we next have Senna and Ashe. Of course, Senna is kind of the go-to support if you are an ADC main autofill to support. But of course, she doesn't work in, certain team comps where you have a full team of squishies. Ashe, I know they're trying to nerf her out of the support role, but in my opinion, I think you can never really nerf Ashe out of the support role because Ashe, by nature, her kit is a utility marksman. Now, like, she's gonna have slows, she's gonna have a stun on her ultimate, she's gonna have vision. Now, even if you nerf cooldowns, you nerf damage, you nerf slows, I think Ashe support will always be a thing, and I think Ashe is a really good support. So, I think that the thing that really pushed Ashe's support role was the release of Imperial Mandate, how easily she can apply it to the enemy team and allow her team to proc it. And I think that, ever since then, Ashe is always a support, and I think Ashe will always be a good support. It's just that she may not always be S tier, but I always think that Ashe is going to be, a support. So, of course, I think Rakan is probably your best engaged support option. I think Janna and Braum are really good for different reasons. Janna, because of how many assassins there are in the meta. Think of Kha'Zix, Kayn, of course we have other champions, Akali, Irelia, Pyke, so on and so forth. Janna does really well at peeling her ADC or whoever else on her team from these assassins. And if you have a good Janna player, their tornadoes are going to be really on point and they can do this really, really well. I personally play with someone who's really good on Janna, and he shows me how strong Janna really can be. So I think that Janna really is a very strong champion if, you're good on Janna. Finally, we have Braum. So Braum kind of counters ADCs, and with, a situation where you have like 2-3 ADCs on a team, Braum kind of really counters ADCs really hard. The main weakness of Braum is his laning phase is trash. He can be very easily bullied in lane, and like he can't really do much in lane. But now, you have a new Braum tech where like you basically max your E, and like that reduces its increases its damage reduction and reduces its cooldown, and you just spam your E all the time and just block damage, and you become so tanky just because of your E, like without even building too much tank items yet. And I think Braum is just really strong. And as I mentioned, the rest of the support tier list remains the same. So anyways, guys, thank you guys so much for watching this video. And stay tuned, of course, for more guides coming up in the upcoming days with double uploads in a day. Thank you guys so much for watching, and goodbye.